How much should a franchise change its look when it comes back from the dead? This is a topic I've been mulling over the past 2 weeks, ever since I made a video about the new Netflix Devil May Cry and how much of its signature aesthetic was missing. This new game is called Marathon, and immediately I noticed something about it. Its very unique aesthetic. However, Marathon technically already had a visual identity. Let's go back to 1994, back when Bungie had released its original Marathon game. Its look was in the same vein as Doom, Wolfenstein, or Shadow Warrior loosely. Granted, many of these games back then very often looked similar, due in no small part to hardware constraints of those years. However, regardless of that fact, Marathon and its cohorts may still often be associated with that original style. Now, by no means am I saying one should try their best to stick to that original exact style, as that would be ludicrous. Updating it is definitely in order, the same way Doom or Wolfenstein modernized their original aesthetic rather well, I'd say. It is important, in my view, to retain some of the visual identity. A modern take on the aesthetic without feeling like something entirely new is key. Well, that was my fervent stance initially. However, while writing the script, and thanks to some discussion in the comments of my previous video, I had altered my initial stance on the matter, and now I realize there is more nuance to it than that. I have said before that an aesthetic is the soul of a game or anime, etc. And I stand by that. I mean, what is Devil May Cry without its familiar, edgy, dark, gothic, or as I called it, cathedral gloom look? It ceases being Devil May Cry. I can't downplay how important a visual identity is to a franchise. Some maintain their roots, some evolve while retaining their roots, but on the other hand, a bold change to a visual identity might not always be the fate worse than death that I thought it was. The new Marathon, for all its negative feedback, made a mark from the outset on how distinct its new look is. Marathon and its original aesthetic is nowhere to be seen. Marathon is a game originally from 1994, but I can assure you many would not have known that. There are so many games and other media that are based off of long-standing franchises that the majority of folks would not have even known existed unless they did a deep dive themselves. Marathon's new iteration is not at all honoring its original aesthetic roots. In fact, it's a rather large detachment thematically from its original look. And though I can truly appreciate a stylistic change, however vast, it's important to understand that not everyone will take to it. Marathon's original aesthetic can be described as brutalist tech noir, with its industrial look, claustrophobic corridors, muted colors, and CRT screens scattered about. By comparison, the new Marathon couldn't be further from that. Its aesthetic can be described as hypermodern, clean sci-fi, or as Bungie describes it, graphic realism. With its sleek, vibrant color palette, ultra-stylized UI and gear, and flat geometrical yet abstract environment, quite literally taking inspiration from Formula 1, where everything in Formula 1 is centered around speed, function, and efficiency down to the colors they use. Visually, the new Marathon sets itself apart as a unique spectacle, if anything. No matter what you think of the game or Bungie, or if it didn't take any inspiration from its predecessor, you have to admit, this is great looking. It is super stylized, and man, is it memorable already. Breaking news! Quick interjection before we continue. There's something important that needs to be addressed. Recently, allegations have surfaced that some of the visuals seen in Bungie's promotional material bear a striking resemblance to the work of an independent artist known as Anti-Real. And when I say striking, I mean undeniably similar. Now, as someone who creates and deeply values art, this hits a nerve. Art theft isn't just lazy, it's exploitative. And if Bungie knowingly, or through poor oversight, lifted or repurposed Anti-Real's work without compensation or credit, that's something that needs to be addressed publicly. That said, we also need to acknowledge the complexity here. Big studios like Bungie often contract out visuals to third-party vendors of teams, and sometimes assets are purchased or sourced in ways that aren't properly vetted. So while the resemblance is real, the blame might lie with the third-party artist or contractor. Still, Bungie is the face of this project, and the responsibility ultimately falls on them to investigate and respond transparently. I like what Marathon is trying to do visually, but we can't praise the style without holding studios accountable for the source of that style. Now back to our regularly scheduled meandering. The art director of this new iteration of Marathon, Joseph Cross, you can see his work everywhere, and he knows what he's doing clearly. I mean, just look at Destiny. Dead Space, the Ghost in the Shell movie. When it comes to aesthetic, to world building, through design, he has that in spades. There's no doubt that this man has the creative vision to make a project feel good through its art direction alone. So it's clear that with his new marathon, he wanted to go in a visually new direction, which, of course, any creative should do. By all means, push boundaries, break molds. Playing it safe is exactly what gives us the same old slop we see in so much of our media now. But a small issue arises. It's not that it isn't visually appealing. Let's be honest, it's stunning. It's minimal in a busy sci-fi kind of way. It's technology meets organic. The colors pop without being overly saturated. The environments feel thought through and atmospheric. Everything looks like it belongs within its own universe. But that's just it. It feels like it belongs to its own universe. It's no longer a reimagining. It feels like a completely separate IP that just happens to use the name Marathon. However, the 90s trilogy is rather dated at this point, and maintaining some remnants of its visual style may just hinder any creative expression when attempting to revisit the IP. And trying to make something great while attempting to hold on to the limitations of the past may just be more of a hassle than it's worth. There is risk with artistry, the risk in creating. Bold takes, untrodden paths, visionary swings, they don't always stick, sadly. Even when what you're making is truly visually stunning, even when it's high concept and refined, some will not enjoy this new approach, and you can't fault them for that. But you also can't fault the creative team for wanting to drastically overhaul something that's been shelved for almost 30 years, gathering dust and otherwise forgotten. If, of course, the change is made with creative intent rather than for simply cutting corners. See, new IPs are obsessed with being marketable more than being memorable. They chase trends, not tone. They forget the aesthetic isn't decoration. It's the narrative language, the atmosphere, the soul. When you modernize media, the visuals need to evolve, yes, but that core should not be overlooked. Strip that away and you may just be wearing the skin of a better idea. So while Doom got a visual makeover, it respected its legacy, it looked new but felt like Doom. That's the balance fans often look for. Evolution, not reinvention. Marathon, though, went full tilt with their approach, and whether it sticks is really up to the individual. It's that strange paradox. You can have a project that is objectively good, led by someone with incredible artistic chops, and still have it not land. And I don't think that's a failure of design, but maybe a miscalculation in context. It's a hard truth. You can make something great and people don't have to like it. I find there's a grey area when it comes to modernizing something beloved but dated and maintaining the aesthetic. I usually fall into the maintaining the aesthetic camp, but I do understand that changes to a known IP is sometimes necessary. For what qualifies for change and to what degree is a grey area. However, I do believe, where possible, a visual identity is not something we should overlook, as blatant changes are at times not necessary, and we do see changes being done often without much thought as to why. Perhaps with Devil May Cry, it was visually rich and timeless, and changing it would do a lot more damage. Whereas Marathon, for example, they have room to reinvent because its visuals are not its biggest hook. And of course, it is a dated IP with a very dated look. However, I could be wrong. See, our tastes may have evolved. Where once folks enjoyed brutalist and heavy, clean and stylized is just preferable now. And something that is so thematically different from what the current public would like might be in need of some changes. So tell me, is it better to evolve visually and risk losing identity, or stay the same and risk feeling outdated? Or does it depend? Perhaps if the visual identity is not a massive core component of an IP, or if the aesthetic wasn't all that unique to begin with. Maybe. I guess what matters most is that the soul survives, even if the skin changes.